So, besides the soul that we relate to and soul progression, there's another progression going on which is underappreciated by us because we think, well, I'm soul and I'm transcending. Um, so my purpose is fulfilled in the soul transcendence. I mean, my soul comes into all this. It learns what it's here to learn, to experience for God, and then it goes back into God. And that's the soul return of the soul transcendence. It transcends all this, and that is a instrumental part of God's purpose. And we as souls fulfill that. But that we call the lower self or the basic self is also fulfilling a level of God's intent. Only it's fulfilling a level of God's intent, particularly in terms of we could call the God of the soul realm individuates itself, and it knows the part of the dimensionality that it creates. And the basic self is very tied to its purpose of knowing all that it's manifested. So it has its own progression, its own cycle. Now its progression cycle moves very much into the denser worlds with first, and there's this physical world very much through the physical senses, but also somewhat into the metaphysical worlds with psychic senses. Now the soul also has its sensing capacity too, in each of the levels. But the basic self is very actively engaged, and it very much, by linking with the soul, it really helps the soul to get into all of this, because it's much more attracted to all of this by its design to want to engage into the Maya or the Alila or any of those names there's given to the dream that this world is. That this conditioned temporary state has a much stronger allure for it, because it comes out of something, it comes out of a state of consciousness that is vibrationally closer. See, vibration is the right one, but is intentionally vibrationally closer to this condition than that what the soul comes out of. So therefore, the soul, by linking to the basic self and through the physicality with us, it helps the soul get into this world, to get into the karma, to get lost in the karma, but also then to learn what this level has for the soul. So the basic self has great value to our soul progression, but more than that, it has a value to God in its own progression. Now, there's an interesting thing that happens that's really not understood here, is that many people start to move up in their soulic progression. Meaning they're starting to travel out of the body and become aware, become initiated, all these different things to the soul and levels above that. So it's like, well, the soul is then going to a level above that. And there's something I was told many, many, many years ago, mostly referencing to my own approach, because I kind of got the understanding of this whole soul thing was really what really mattered to me. So I just wanted to go up there as much as I could. And in a sense, that was like saying, and in the process of doing that, I'd get away from all this. But I was told frequently this idea that said, for a tree to grow taller, it must sink its roots deeper. And so to sink its roots deeper, I thought, oh, that means I need to be grounded. I mean to stay connected here. And it was rather paradoxical to me that the more I was having the transcendent awareness of the soul and those realities maybe beyond the soul, there was just also this thing where I was needing to get more physically involved, physically engaged. And there was a point in my life where I had the option to leave and had a completion, at least in terms of what I had to do to finish, to be in the physical world, and could have been done. And there was an agreement that I would come back, but I was given to come back. I had to take on very definitive things. There would be things that I would be committed to, that I would care about, that would focus me into the world, and that would put my intention and my energy back into this level. And so I agreed to those things and took them on, and then I could come back in and be here. So I had to sink my roots deeper into this, which is paradoxical. I had to sink my roots deeper here because I was going higher. Now, can you go higher and still be here to a certain point? Yes, if you don't have enough, if you don't have rootedness here and you go up enough, if you go up, really go up there, and then there's two things that can happen. One, you can go up there, but you're not going to be really allowed to know it. And there's people that have that, and they'll come up to you and say, well, I have, I found out I'm, I have, whatever they say, I have 27 levels of initiation, I have 24 levels, I have 19 levels of initiation. I hear this from all sorts of different people. And I don't argue it or dispute it because I'm not disagreeing with it all by saying that's amazing, that's wonderful. But the thing about it is that mostly they can't bring that back. And the reason they can't bring that back in a strange sort of way is their roots are not deep enough. So they can have it in a sense there, but they can't be conscious of it here because to be conscious of that would overwhelm them. It'd be too much for them to be aware as that, in that, and also engage into all this. So part of the keys that allows one to have that greater conscious awareness of the spirit reality and also be able to function in this world, but also to have that higher awareness while being able to be conscious here has to do with the basic self, being able to hold the dynamic here, and that actually involves progression of the basic self. The basic self has to be more attuned in its own progression, come more awake to its own true nature as an individuation of God. And in doing that, it has to move past its own karma. Karma means action, so its own action that engages in the world. And yet the basic self's engagement is very much into the world and very much into involvement here. So it's kind of like saying, so does it give up being the basic self and become more like the yogi in the cave that withdraws from it? No, it has to become, in a strange way, not less involved, but more involved with the simultaneous awareness of where it's sourced out of, which has a detachment and has a love for it all. So it's almost like the basic self has to then start to come awake to itself as an extension out of the God or the soul realm. And as the basic self starts to have that, all of a sudden it has its own kind of enlightenment, which is different than the soulic enlightenment, but it's an awareness of the simultaneous awareness of the physicality and what it's doing here, but also an awareness of the overview that God holds for this, that is creation coming out of that, and it starts to have its own version of simultaneous consciousness. Now, most basic selves don't have that, but that is their progressive destiny, not unlike the souls having a progressive destiny. But they come into it in their own way, in their own time. John Roger, when he was here, carried a very masterful basic self. And he related that it was Daniel, was the name he gave to it, that it had been with the one who in the Bible was Daniel in the lion's den. But he didn't talk a lot about it, but one of the things that I had seen about him, and then he had just confirmed it for me, that his basic self, Daniel, was also an archangel, that was working into the basic self dynamic of it in its own way. Why? Because it allowed him to be very present here, but also conscious of the transcendent. So the basic self progresses into a greater state too. This is one of the things I think that's kind of been misunderstood of why it's so important that we have, let's say, if we want to really be one who manifests the spirit back into the world. One of my quotes, I've quoted Jaron a number of times and probably misquoted him because it was so long ago when he said it, but when somebody said to him, J.R. the Maharishi says that if we can get 1% of the people on the planet meditating on the upliftment of the planet, we can change the consciousness of the whole planet. And I've relayed my remembrance of his answer was something like, yes, that's very true. If we could get 1% of the people meditating on the upliftment of the planet, it would change the consciousness of the whole planet. And, now at this point, at the time, I think it was more like 40 million people. Now it would be like 72 million people. But then his answer was, but if we can get 100 people established in the soul plane, meditating those energies of soul back into the world, those 100 people will change the consciousness of this planet far, far more than that 1% ever would. So that's my rough remembrance, and I told the story enough. I probably butchered what exactly he said, but that was the message I came away with it. And I thought at that time, I want to be one of the 100.